Chapter 1. The Note. The pacing started at 2 in the morning. Cora knew this because she'd started timing it, the way a person who has lost all control of their life latches onto the one thing they can measure. 2:03. Every night. Thump, thump, thump. Slow, deliberate, relentless. The sound of someone walking back and forth across a room directly above her bed, as if the floor had insulted their ancestors and they were working through it one footstep at a time. She'd tried earplugs. She'd tried white noise. She'd tried a meditation app narrated by a man whose voice was so calm it made her want to commit a small crime. She'd tried rearranging her bedroom so the bed was under the window instead of under the pacing. But the pacing followed her. It was everywhere. It was the entire ceiling. 6 months. For 6 months, she had been living beneath a metronome with legs. "That's it," she said to the glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to her ceiling. They were left over from the previous tenant, a detail she found depressing in a way she couldn't articulate. "We're doing this." She got up. She went to the kitchen. She found the thickest red marker she owned, the one she used for design emergencies and passive-aggressive edits on client briefs, and a sheet of paper from the printer. She wrote, "Some of us have jobs that don't involve wearing a groove into your floorboards. It is 2 a.m. every night for 6 months. Stop pacing or I will take action. I haven't decided what action yet, but I have had 6 months to think about it, and none of my ideas are legal." She read it over, nodded, took the elevator to the penthouse floor, taped it to his door, gave it a firm, final pat. "Your move," she said to the door. "Weirdo." The pacing stopped. She slept for 9 hours straight and woke up feeling like a person who had been reassembled from spare parts. Functional spare parts for once. The next morning, she opened her front door and found a sheet of cardstock on her welcome mat. It was cream-colored and thick enough to file a tax return on. The handwriting was precise, elegant, and slightly old-fashioned, the kind of cursive that suggested the writer had learned penmanship from someone who had opinions about penmanship. "My dearest, aggrieved neighbor, my sincerest apologies. The disturbance was inexcusable. Might I offer dinner as recompense? The choice of cuisine is yours. Your neighbor, L. P.S. I would not recommend taking legal action. My attorney is very old, very expensive, and profoundly humorless." Below the postscript, a phone number. Cora's first thought was, who writes like this? Her second thought was, who has cardstock just lying around? Her third thought, the one that stuck, was, what kind of person paces every single night for 6 months and then writes the most polite apology note in the history of apartment living? She typed a message before her common sense could intervene. "Cora, this is your downstairs neighbor, the one whose sleep you've been murdering. What's with the pacing?" The reply came back in 4 seconds. She checked. "Unknown number. A chronic condition. I do not sleep. The nights are very long and the apartment is very quiet. Movement helps. Until, as you have made eloquently clear, it doesn't. Cora, you don't sleep? At all? Unknown number. Not in a very long time. Cora, how long is a very long time? Unknown number. Longer than you would find plausible. Shall we discuss it over Thai food? I'm told the place on 9th does an excellent curry. I have not eaten there personally, but the reviews are persuasive. Cora, why haven't you eaten there personally? Unknown number. I don't eat. Cora, you don't eat. Unknown number. It's part of the condition. I realize this raises more questions than it answers. Thai food, 8 o'clock. You can ask all of them." She stared at the phone. She saved the contact as upstairs problem and went to work, where she spent 8 hours designing a logo for a boutique pickle company that had opinions about font weight and Braille typography. At 7:55 p.m., she stepped out of the elevator into the lobby wearing dark jeans and a silk blouse. The outfit that said, I'm making an effort, but a measured one. A man was standing by the ficus tree. The first thing she noticed was the stillness. He wasn't checking his phone, shifting his weight, or doing any of the small, restless things people do when they're waiting. He was simply standing there, perfectly motionless, as if someone had placed him and he'd decided to stay. He turned when the elevator opened. His face was... she didn't have a word for it. Handsome, but in a way that felt borrowed from another century. Sharp jaw, dark eyes, cheekbones that could have been engineered by someone who was very good at cheekbones. His hair was dark, his suit was immaculate, and he carried himself with the particular gravity of someone who was used to rooms rearranging themselves around him. Miss Cora, the one you've been keeping awake for half a year. A small, careful smile. It was alarmingly effective. Lucienne, the one with the condition, and, apparently, the heavy feet. He extended a hand. His skin was cool, not cold, but noticeably cool, like holding a stone that had been sitting in shade. You look like you just fired someone from a very old bank, she said. I was going for approachable. You landed on CFO at a funeral, but I'm here for the food, not the fashion critique. Let's go. The restaurant was the kind of place where the menu didn't list prices, which meant the prices would hurt. The hostess greeted Lucienne by name, with a flicker of something that wasn't quite fear but was definitely not casual. They sat. Cora ordered the jungle curry. Lucienne ordered nothing. And for you, sir? Nothing, thank you. I've eaten. The waiter left. Cora leaned forward. You told me you don't eat. I don't. But telling a waiter, my body violently rejects all food, tends to create an atmosphere. So you're just going to sit there. I'm going to sit here and enjoy your company, and the smell of your curry. I have an excellent sense of smell. That's weird. Many things about me are weird. Ask your questions. The curry arrived. It was extraordinary, a molten, fragrant assault that made her eyes water in the best possible way. She took a bite, composed herself, and looked at him. Okay, question 1. What condition makes you not sleep and not eat? I'm a vampire. She waited for the smile, the laugh, the, just kidding, it's actually a rare autoimmune disorder. It didn't come. He was watching her with those dark, steady eyes, his expression completely neutral. You're a vampire? She repeated. Yes. Like a real one. Fangs, blood, the whole thing. Fangs, yes. Blood, yes. The whole thing covers quite a lot of territory, but broadly, yes. She took another bite of curry. She chewed, she swallowed. Okay, question 2. What's a vampire doing in a penthouse apartment in the city, pacing at 2 a.m. like a man who owes money to someone frightening? Something shifted behind his eyes, a flicker of, not discomfort, caution. Like a door had opened a crack and he was deciding how much light to let through. I'm hiding, he said. From what? From my own people. He folded his hands on the table. I am, or was, responsible for a considerable number of vampires, a leadership role. I discovered recently that someone in my inner circle is attempting to expose our existence to a human government, selling intelligence, names, locations, vulnerabilities. I don't know who. If I stay where I'm expected to be, surrounded by people I can't trust, I will either be killed by the traitor or forced to act before I have enough information. So I left. Quietly. I'm here under a false name, running the investigation remotely, with one person I trust handling matters on the other end. Your attorney, the old, expensive, humorless one. Alistair. He is 500 years old and has been managing my affairs since the Reformation. He is the only person who knows where I am. Cora stared at him. The curry was cooling. The restaurant hummed around them. A couple at the next table was arguing about whether to get dessert. So, let me get this straight, she said slowly. You're an ancient vampire. You're a king, or the vampire equivalent. You're hiding in a penthouse apartment from your own court because there's a mole selling vampire secrets to the government. And the reason I haven't slept in 6 months is because your spy thriller has insomnia. That is an accurate summary, yes. And you're telling me all of this because? Because you asked? And because you left me an extremely aggressive note with a red marker, which suggests you are not a person who tolerates evasion. She picked up her spoon. She put it down. She picked it up again. I have a follow-up question. Of course. The curry here. Is it always this good, or did you pick the best Thai place in the city to soften me up? That smile again. I researched extensively. Reviews, food blogs, 3 separate rating platforms. I wanted to ensure the apology was proportional to the offense. You spent more time choosing a restaurant than most people spend choosing a spouse. I have been alive for 800 years. I have learned that getting the small things right prevents the large things from going wrong. She pointed her spoon at him. That's either incredibly wise or the most extra thing anyone has ever said to me. I can't tell which. It can be both. She ate her curry. He watched her eat it with an attention that should have been unnerving, but was, instead, oddly flattering. As if the act of someone enjoying a meal was a small miracle he'd been missing. You really can't eat anything, she said. No, my body has rejected food for approximately 8 centuries. The last thing I ate was a fig, in what is now southern France, in 1224. It did not go well. You remember the specific fig? It was an exceptional fig. The aftermath was less exceptional. She laughed. A real, startled laugh. He looked at her when she did it, quickly, with an expression she couldn't decode. Something between surprise and hunger, and not the kind of hunger she should be thinking about. Okay, she said. Here's my final question for tonight. I'm at your disposal. If you're in hiding, and this is supposed to be a secret identity, why are you telling the random graphic designer who lives downstairs? He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, the practiced composure was gone, and what was underneath it was simpler and more raw than she expected. Because I have been in that apartment for 7 months, he said, and you are the only person who has knocked on my door, or rather, taped a note to it. Everyone else in this building pretends the penthouse doesn't exist. You were furious, sleep-deprived, armed with a marker, and you came upstairs anyway. He paused. I have been hiding for 7 months, Cora. It is significantly lonelier than I anticipated. And you are the first person in a very long time who has treated me like a neighbor instead of a problem to be avoided. The moment sat between them, raw and real and a little too honest for a first dinner. Well, she said, clearing her throat, if you wanted a friend, you could have just stopped pacing and brought me coffee. I don't drink coffee. You don't have to drink it, you just have to deliver it. That's how friendship works in this century. I see. And the pacing? Stops tonight, non-negotiable. I have a pickle logo to present tomorrow, and I need to be sharp. A pickle logo. Don't say it like that. Pickles are a $28 billion industry. I had no idea. Nobody does. That's why they need a logo. She wiped her mouth, tossed the napkin on the table. Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop pacing. I'm going to sleep. Tomorrow, you're going to text me something weird about modern life that confuses you, and I'm going to make fun of you for it, and we'll go from there. That sounds, he searched for the word, normal. Yeah, she said, that's the point. Chapter 2, The Arrangement. He texted her the next morning at 6 a.m., which, for him, was basically bedtime, if he had a bedtime, which he didn't. Upstairs problem. The building's recycling instructions contain 47 separate categories. I have been alive for 8 centuries, and I cannot determine whether a yogurt container is Category 12, rigid plastics, or Category 19, mixed polymer packaging. I put it in the regular bin. I feel like a criminal. It's Category 12. And you're not a criminal, you're just European. Upstairs. Problem. I am not European. I predate the concept of Europe. That's the most pretentious thing anyone has ever said about recycling. He was, she was discovering, absolutely useless at modern life, in ways that were both hilarious and oddly specific. He could discuss the fall of Constantinople with the casual authority of someone who'd been there, because he had been there. But he could not operate her building's laundry machines. The dial has 9 settings, he said, standing in the basement laundry room, staring at the washing machine with the expression of a man facing an ancient enemy. None of them correspond to any fabric I own. What fabrics do you own? Italian wool, Egyptian cotton. One silk shirt I've had since 1847. Use delicate, and don't put the silk shirt in the machine. Where does the silk shirt go? To a dry cleaner, like a normal person. I am not a normal person. No kidding. Put the wool on cold. He did. The machine made a sound. He stepped back from it like it had growled at him. It's washing, she said. That's what it's supposed to do. It's aggressive. It's a washing machine. Machines have personalities. This one is hostile. She started spending time in his apartment, which was enormous, minimalist, and furnished with the particular taste of someone who had given up on comfort around the same time they'd given up on food. Everything was dark wood, clean lines, and empty surfaces. The only personal touches were books, hundreds of them, on every surface, in stacks and rows, some of them so old the spines were crumbling. You need a rug, she told him, standing in his living room, and a lamp that isn't designed to make people confess to crimes. The lamp is from Milan. The lamp is from a villain's lair. It's actively hostile to human comfort. Do you own anything that isn't either ancient or Italian? I have a toaster. You don't eat. Alistair bought it. He said it completed the cover. I have not used it. Of course you haven't. She brought him a lamp from her apartment, a small, warm one with a fabric shade that cast the kind of light that made rooms feel like someone actually lived in them. She put it on his desk. He stared at it as if she'd placed a small sun on his furniture. It's just a lamp, she said. It changes the room, he said. And the way he said it, quiet, almost confused, like he'd forgotten rooms could change, made something catch in her chest. She started noticing things about him, small things. He never made noise when he moved. He could cross a room without a single footfall, and the only reason she knew he was behind her was the faint shift in air temperature, cooler, always cooler, like standing near an open window in autumn. He noticed everything, every detail, every shift in her mood, every change in her voice. He'd say things like, "You're stressed, your jaw is tighter than it was this morning." And she'd realize he was right, and also that no one had ever paid that kind of attention to her jaw. One evening, she was working on a rebrand for a craft brewery and muttering about color palettes when he leaned over her shoulder and said, "That shade of green suggests mold rather than hops. Might I recommend something closer to the tone of new growth in early spring?" She turned to look at him. His face was very close. She could see the particular darkness of his eyes, not just dark, but deep, the kind of dark that had layers. "How do you know about color theory?" she asked. "I spent 40 years as a patron of a painter in Venice. He was very particular about greens." 40 years? He was slow, but talented. And you just hung around for 4 decades while a guy figured out green. It was the Renaissance. Everyone was figuring things out. It was a productive time. She turned back to her screen. His presence behind her was warm. No, not warm. Present. Specific. The way a shadow is specific when the light source is very precise. "That green," she said, pointing. "Is that the one?" "Closer, a fraction more yellow. Think of it as sunlight through a new leaf." "Sunlight, from the guy who bursts into flames in sunlight." "I remember sunlight," he said, and the humor dropped out of his voice like a stone into water. "I remember it very well." She adjusted the color. It was perfect. She didn't say anything about the way his voice had sounded when he said that. He appeared at her door one night, dressed in a coat that looked like it had been designed for someone who was about to either conduct an orchestra or invade a small country. "How do I look?" he asked. She leaned against the doorframe, like a villain who's about to explain his plan to the hero while standing on a rooftop. "Where are you going?" "A meeting, with Alistair's contact. I need to look," he searched for the word, "normal? Human? Like you belong in this century?" Authoritative but not threatening. That coat is doing threatening all by itself. The collar is staging a coup. Take it off and wear the navy one. He disappeared. Reappeared, she didn't see the transition, just the absence and then the presence in the navy coat. "Better?" "Much. You look like a man who owns a vineyard and has opinions about soil, which is basically the human version of old and powerful." He looked down at himself. "I do, in fact, own a vineyard." "Of course you do. It's in Tuscany. I haven't visited in 30 years. Alistair manages it remotely. He sends me the bottlings." "Can you drink wine?" "No." "So you own a vineyard and you can't drink the wine." "I enjoy knowing it exists, that the grapes still grow, that something I planted in 1743 is still producing." He paused. "Is that strange?" "It's the least strange thing about you," she said. "Go to your meeting. Don't scare anyone. And text me when you're back so I know you weren't assassinated by rogue vampires. Your concern is touching." "It's not concern. If you die, someone worse might move in. Someone who plays drums." He smiled. Not the careful, measured smile he used in public. A real one, surprised out of him, quick and bright and gone before she could catch it properly. She found herself wanting to see it again. He left. She stood in her doorway and watched the elevator close and thought, "I am in so much trouble." Chapter 3. The Fracture. 3 things happened in the same week that changed the shape of everything. The first was the phone call. She was at his apartment. She spent most evenings there now, working on her laptop at his kitchen table, while he read or quietly investigated whatever vampires investigate, when his phone rang. He looked at the screen and his entire body changed. Not dramatically, subtly. A shift in density, as if every molecule had just moved closer together. "I need to take this," he said, and walked to the far end of the apartment. She didn't mean to listen. His apartment was enormous, but he was speaking in a language she didn't recognize. Something old, something with consonants that sounded like they'd been carved. And his voice was different, lower, harder. The voice of someone who was used to giving orders that people didn't question. When he came back, the hardness was gone, replaced by something she was learning to recognize. The careful blankness he wore when something was wrong and he didn't want her to see it. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes, a minor logistical matter." He was lying. She knew he was lying because his hands, which were normally still, inhumanly still, were flexing at his sides. Once, then again. She didn't push, but she filed it. The second thing was the blood. They were in her kitchen. She was making pasta, a simple thing, garlic and oil, the kind of cooking that was more meditation than effort. He was sitting at the counter, reading a battered paperback he'd found on her shelf, occasionally commenting on the plot with the weary authority of someone who had lived through the era the book was set in and found it broadly inaccurate but emotionally earnest. She was slicing bread. The knife slipped. A thin, bright line of red opened across the pad of her thumb. "Damn," she said. "Stupid." She heard the stool scrape. She looked up. He was standing. Not sitting, not in the process of standing. Standing. As if he'd teleported upright, and his face was wrong. His eyes were fixed on her hand, on the blood. His lips were slightly parted and she could actually see, his canines, just barely extended, just enough to change the geometry of his mouth. He wasn't breathing. "Lucien." Nothing. He was a statue made of hunger. "Lucien." His eyes snapped to hers. The irises were darker than they should have been, almost black. He took one step back, then another. Then he turned and walked out of her apartment. Not fast. Deliberately, carefully, each step measured, as if he were walking through something invisible that was pulling him the other direction. The door clicked shut behind him. Cora stood in her kitchen, blood dripping onto the cutting board, her heart going so fast she could feel it in her teeth. She ran her thumb under cold water. She wrapped it in a paper towel. She sat down on the kitchen floor because her legs had decided, independently, that standing was no longer an option. 20 minutes later, a text. Upstairs. Problem, I owe you an explanation. Cora. Yeah, you do. Upstairs. Problem, I need a moment, please. She waited. She waited 45 minutes, during which she cleaned the kitchen, changed her shirt, and ate 3 cookies for reasons she could not explain. Then her phone buzzed. Upstairs. Problem, may I come down? Cora. Yes. A knock. She opened the door. He stood on the welcome mat, the one that said go away, and he looked terrible. Not physically. Physically, he looked the same as always, immaculate, composed, precisely assembled. But his eyes were hollowed out, and his hands were shoved deep into his pockets, and he was standing very, very still. I need to be invited, he said. His voice was rough. I know, come in. He crossed the threshold. He didn't sit down. He stood in her hallway, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked exactly like what he was. Something old and dangerous, trying very hard to be safe. I should have warned you, he said. About the blood. Yeah, that would have been helpful. A heads up, maybe. Hey, Cora, if you cut yourself, I might go full predator in your kitchen. I could have put it on the fridge next to the takeout menus. He flinched. Actually flinched. It isn't... I don't... He stopped, took a breath he didn't need. Blood is not what you think it is, for us. It's not just food, it's proximity. When you cut your hand, I didn't smell food, I smelled you. Everything about you. Every emotion you felt in the last hour. Every place your blood has been in your body. He stopped again. His jaw worked. It is intimate. Profoundly intimate. And I was not prepared for what I what? He looked at her. The composure cracked, and what was underneath it was raw and specific and terrifying. You smelled like someone I would choose, he said. Not just blood. Yours, specifically. And the difference between generic hunger and that is the difference between hearing noise and hearing music. And I have been living on the equivalent of silence for 40 years. The apartment was very quiet. The fridge hummed. Somewhere outside, a car horn. You left, she said. Yes. Because the alternative was not leaving. Yes. Would you have hurt me? No. Immediate. Absolute. I would never. No. But the effort of that no was, he trailed off. It was not small. She looked at him, at this ancient, immaculate, terrified man standing in her hallway, telling her that her blood was music and he'd walked out rather than listen. Okay, she said. He blinked. Okay? Okay, now I know. Next time, I'll be more careful with knives. And you're going to sit down, and I'm going to finish making pasta, and you're going to tell me about the phone call you took earlier, because you lied about it being a minor logistical matter. And I could tell because your hands were doing a thing. My hands were doing a thing? You flex your fingers when you're lying. 3 times left hand. You've done it twice before. Once when you told me you were fine after Alistair's last call. And once when you said you hadn't been worried about the meeting on Tuesday. She raised an eyebrow. I'm a designer. I notice patterns. He stared at her. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked, for the first time in 800 years, genuinely speechless. Sit down, she said. I'm making garlic bread. Garlic is... I know, I'm making it for me. You can sit on the other side of the apartment and suffer. Consider it penance for the predator thing. He sat on the far end of her couch. She made garlic bread. The apartment filled with the smell of butter and roasted garlic, and he sat very still and endured it with the silent dignity of a man who was being punished and knew he deserved it. "The phone call," he said, finally. "The phone call." Alistair has narrowed the list. The traitor is one of 3 people. All of them are in my inner circle. All of them have been close to me for over a century. He paused. One of them is someone I considered a friend. How do you figure out which one? Alistair is tracing communication patterns, financial movements. But the evidence is circumstantial, and in my world, circumstantial evidence gets people killed. I need something definitive. She brought her pasta to the couch, sat on the opposite end from him because the garlic was doing its job, and he was pressed so far into the corner cushion he was nearly part of the furniture. "Tell me about them," she said. "The 3 suspects. You don't need to involve yourself in this. You told me your blood secret in my hallway. I'm already involved. Tell me about them." He told her. He talked for an hour and she ate her pasta and she listened. Chapter 4. The Pattern. The 3 suspects were Marcus, Elise, and Thorn. Marcus had been with Lucian for 200 years. A strategist, precise, ambitious in the way that old vampires were ambitious. Not for power, but for relevance. He managed Lucian's financial holdings across 3 continents and had access to every account, every property, every identity Lucian had ever used. "He's the logical choice," Lucian said one evening, pacing Cora's living room. He'd started pacing again, not at 2 a.m. over her ceiling, but in her space, during their conversations, when the anxiety of the investigation overwhelmed his 800 years of practice at looking calm. She let him. The sound of his footsteps, which had once driven her to write a threatening note, now meant he was thinking. She'd gotten used to it. She'd gotten used to a lot of things. "Why logical?" she asked from the floor, where she was surrounded by printouts of the latest pickle company revisions. Pickles, it turned out, waited for no vampire crisis. Access. He handles the money. If someone is selling information to a government, they're receiving payment, and payment leaves traces. Marcus would know how to hide those traces because he's the one who built the systems. So he's either the traitor or the person best equipped to catch the traitor. Exactly, which is the problem. Elise was older, 300 years in Lucian's service. She handled intelligence, the monitoring of human institutions, the maintenance of the secrecy that kept vampires hidden. She knew every vulnerability in their concealment network because she'd built half of it. "Alistair doesn't like her," Lucian admitted. "Does Alistair like anyone?" "He likes you. He's never met me. He likes that you exist. He told me you were refreshingly direct for a mammal. Coming from Alistair, that's practically a marriage proposal." And Thorn. Thorn was the wild card. Younger by vampire standards, only 160. Charismatic, popular among the lower ranks, and the one who had first brought the rumor of a traitor to Lucian's attention. "Which is suspicious," Cora said. "Why?" "Because in every crime show I've ever watched, the person who reports the crime first is usually the one who committed it. It's a control move. You get ahead of the story, you shape the narrative, you position yourself as the loyal whistleblower." Lucian looked at her. "You're applying the logic of television crime dramas to an 800-year-old vampire conspiracy. Am I wrong?" He was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said. "You're not wrong. Continue." She didn't have a murder board. She had a design board, a large corkboard in her home office where she pinned client briefs, color swatches, and layout ideas. She cleared half of it and started pinning the details Lucian gave her: names, dates, movements, connections. "This is what you do?" Lucian asked, watching her arrange index cards with the same intensity she used for logo presentations. "For your work?" "It's the same skill. Design is about patterns. What goes where, what connects to what, what's missing from the composition." Right now, your trader problem is a bad layout. Something's in the wrong place, and once I find it, the whole thing will make sense. You're treating a centuries-old political conspiracy like a branding project. Everything is a branding project. Your trader is selling a brand, I'm loyal, while running a side business. There's always a tell, a place where the brand doesn't match the product. He watched her work. He watched her the way he always watched her, with that particular focused attention that made her feel like the most interesting thing in any room, which, given that he'd been in rooms with monarchs and revolutionaries, was either flattering or a sign that he needed to get out more. Cora. You have marker on your face. She swiped at her cheek. Gone? No, you've made it worse. She swiped again. He made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Oh, come here, she said impatiently, holding out the marker. If you're going to judge, be useful. He came closer. He reached out and, very gently, very carefully, wiped the ink from her cheek with his thumb. His skin was cool against her face. His fingers lingered a fraction of a second too long. They were very close. Close enough that she could see the particular quality of his eyes, not just dark, but layered, like looking into deep water. Close enough that she could feel the coolness radiating from his skin, a permanent autumn. Got it, he murmured. Thanks, she said. Her voice came out different than she intended, softer, smaller. He dropped his hand, stepped back. The air between them felt like it had been rearranged. I should go, he said. Alistair is calling at midnight. It's 11:40. Yes, I should. I need to prepare. For a phone call. It's a complicated phone call. Lucian. Yes? You're doing the hand thing again. He looked down at his left hand. The fingers flexed, caught, released. He closed his eyes briefly. Good night, Cora. Good night, Lucian. He left. She stood in her living room, her cheek still cool where his thumb had been, and thought, this is not a neighbor situation anymore. This is something else. And whatever it is, it's going to be a problem. Chapter 5. Alistair. The problem arrived on a Tuesday, wearing tweed. Cora was in the lobby checking her mail. She never got anything interesting, just circulars and a persistent credit card offer addressed to current resident that was starting to feel personal, when the front door opened and a man walked in who looked like he had been personally exhausted by every century since the 15th. He was tall, thin, and dressed in a suit that suggested an era when clothing was a statement of endurance rather than style. His face was a masterwork of weary resignation, the kind of face that had seen empires rise and fall and had been mildly irritated by all of them. He carried a leather briefcase that was older than the building. He scanned the lobby. His eyes landed on Cora. Something happened in his expression, a microscopic shift, a recognition she couldn't account for. Miss Cora, he said. It was not a question. Alistair, she said, because who else could it be? He looked at her for a long moment, his gaze assessing, thorough, and utterly without warmth. Then he said, You're shorter than I expected. You're exactly what I expected. And what was that? Tired. The corner of his mouth twitched. It was the ghost of a smile, haunting a face that had clearly given up on smiling around the time of the Reformation. I need to speak with His Majesty, he said. I assume he's upstairs, given that he has not answered his phone in 36 hours, a pattern which historically precedes either a catastrophic political decision or the purchase of unnecessary real estate. He's upstairs. I'll take you up. In the elevator, she studied him. He stood with the rigid posture of someone for whom relaxation was a theoretical concept. His eyes stared straight ahead. He smelled faintly of old paper and something sharper, ink maybe, or the particular chemical signature of someone who had been handling very old documents. You're staring, he said, without looking at her. Sorry, I've never met a 500-year-old before. Lucian's the only vampire I know. I am not a tourist attraction, Miss Cora. I know, But you're wearing a suit from the 1890s, and you called him His Majesty, so you're at least a conversation piece. That ghost smile again. He told me you were mouthy. He said that? He said you were refreshingly candid, I translated. She knocked on Lucian's door. It opened instantly. He'd heard them coming, of course, and the look on his face when he saw Alistair was complicated. Relief. Tension. The look of a man who is glad to see the doctor, but knows the diagnosis isn't good. Alistair, you're here in person. The matter could not wait for another phone call you wouldn't answer. Alistair stepped inside, surveyed the apartment with a single, comprehensive glance, and zeroed in on the lamp Cora had brought. He stared at it. That's new, he said. Cora brought it, Lucian said. It's warm, Alistair said, in a tone that made warm sound like a foreign substance that might require quarantine. It's a lamp, Cora said. It's supposed to be warm. Alistair set his briefcase on the kitchen counter, opened it, and produced a folder. The communications trace is complete. The encrypted channel used to contact the Human Intelligence Agency was routed through 4 proxy servers, all of them registered to shell companies. He laid 3 pages on the counter. Marcus's financial network, Elise's intelligence infrastructure, and Thorne's recent travel movements. Lucian studied them. Cora, who had not been invited to look, but was not a person who waited for invitations, came around the counter and looked too. Alistair glanced at her, then at Lucian. She's aware of the situation, Lucian said. She's a human. She's a graphic designer with an excellent eye for patterns. And she's already built a murder board. It's not a murder board, Cora said. It's an investigation board. Murder boards have red string. Mine has index cards and post-its. Alistair looked at her for a long moment. Red string is traditional, he said. Index cards are more organized. Something shifted in his posture, a fraction of the rigidity easing, like a wall developing a hairline crack. Show me, he said. She took them both to her apartment. Alistair studied her board with the focused intensity of someone who had been analyzing intelligence for 5 centuries. He said nothing for 4 full minutes. Then he turned to Lucian. She's organized it by access points rather than chronology. Yes, Cora said, because the question isn't when the information was leaked, it's how. The channel to the government is the output, but the input, the original access to the sensitive data, that's the design flaw. Whoever the traitor is, they had to be in a position to access specific information at specific times. So I mapped the access, not the timeline. Alistair looked at Lucian, then back at Cora, then at the board again. She's not wrong, he said, and the admission sounded like it caused him physical pain. They worked for 3 hours. Alistair produced documents from his briefcase with the relentless efficiency of a very old, very organized machine. Lucian translated the political context. Cora moved index cards around the board and asked questions that neither vampire had thought to ask because they were both too close to their own world to see it the way an outsider would. Why would anyone sell this information? She asked at one point. What does a vampire get from exposing their own kind to a human government? Power, Lucian said. Control. If one faction within our world can establish an alliance with a human government, trading intelligence for protection, or for the ability to operate openly within a protected legal framework, they would gain an advantage over every other faction. So it's not about destroying vampire secrecy, it's about monetizing it. Yes, this is just a hostile corporate takeover with fangs. Alistair made a sound. She looked at him. She wasn't sure at first because the expression was so foreign on his face, but he was almost smiling. I have been trying to explain the dynamics of immortal politics to humans for 500 years, he said, and you have just summarized it more accurately in one sentence than any of them managed. I work in branding. Everything is a hostile corporate takeover. At midnight, Alistair closed his briefcase. He stood. I'll return tomorrow evening, he said. There are threads to follow. Lucian walked him to the door. Cora was cleaning up the kitchen. Alistair drank tea, which she found absurdly endearing. A 500-year-old vampire who drank Earl Grey like a Victorian governess. And she heard them murmuring in the hallway. She didn't catch most of it, but she caught one fragment in Alistair's voice, low and stripped of its usual dryness. "Be careful with her." And Lucian's reply, quieter still, "I know." After Alistair left, Lucian came back inside. He stood in her living room and looked at the investigation board and said nothing for a long time. "He likes you," he said, finally. "He told me I was mouthy. That's how he shows affection." He called the last person he genuinely liked tolerable, and that was in 1847. High praise. The highest. She should have let it end there. She should have said goodnight, let him go upstairs, let the comfortable routine continue. But the conversation she'd overheard was sitting in her chest like a small, sharp stone. "He told you to be careful with me." Lucian went still. "I heard him," she said, "in the hallway." He was quiet for a long time. The apartment hummed. Outside, the city did its relentless, living thing. "He's right," Lucian said, finally. "I should be careful with you." "Why?" "Because you're mortal, Cora. Because you will age and I will not. Because every minute I spend in your apartment, and every evening you spend in mine, and every time you make me laugh or hand me a lamp or tell me my coat looks like a villain costume, I am building something I cannot keep." The words landed like stones in still water. She felt the ripples. "Is that what this is?" she asked. "Something you're building?" He looked at her. The 800 years were visible, not in his face, which was ageless, but in his eyes, which held the particular weight of someone who had watched the world remake itself over and over and had always, always been the one left standing when it was done. "Yes," he said, "and I have no idea what to do about it." "Well," she said, and her voice was steady, though her heart was doing something that could only be described as mutinous. "Lucky for you, I'm good at design. And the first rule of design is, you don't have to know what the final product looks like. You just have to start." She held out her hand. He looked at it. He looked at her. He took her hand. His was cool. Hers was warm. Neither of them let go. Chapter 6. The Tell. The answer came from the pickles. Not literally. But Cora was working on the final round of revisions for the pickle company, the logo, the packaging, the full brand identity, when she noticed it. She'd been staring at the investigation board between rounds of client feedback, and her brain, which had been marinating in both problems simultaneously, made a connection. Lucian. He was in her armchair, reading. He'd started leaving books at her apartment, old ones, beautiful ones, books she was afraid to touch because they probably belonged in a museum. But he left them casually, on her side table, on her kitchen counter, as if his things had just naturally migrated to where she was. She pretended not to notice. She noticed everything. "Lucian? Look at this." She pulled up the 3 financial documents Alistair had left. She put them side by side on her screen, then pulled up the access point board she'd built. 3 suspects, 3 sets of financial records, 3 different ways of moving money. But look at the shell companies, she pointed. Marcus's network uses a standard layering structure. Holding company, then subsidiary, then operating entity. It's clean, professional. Exactly what you'd expect from someone who manages finances for a living. Yes? Elise's intelligence infrastructure uses a different structure. Cell-based, compartmentalized. Each node independent. Classic intelligence architecture. I'm familiar with her methods. And Thorne's travel movements, she pulled up the map she'd made. He's been to 11 cities in the last 6 months. Brussels, Geneva, London, Washington, Ottawa, Canberra. All of them capitals or seats of intelligence agencies. We know this. Alistair flagged it. Yes, but look at the pattern. She placed her finger on the map. He visits each city once, stays for 2 to 3 days, leaves, never returns to the same city twice, which suggests he's meeting different contacts. Or, she spun her chair to face him. He's making it look like he's meeting different contacts. Lucian, this is a branding problem. A branding problem. Thorne is the one who reported the traitor. He's positioning himself as the loyal whistleblower. His travel pattern looks suspicious. It's designed to look suspicious. It's a red herring. He wants you to investigate him, waste time on his trail, while the real traitor operates in the background. Cora, I'm not done. Look at Marcus's financials again. She pulled them up. Clean, professional, exactly what you'd expect. Now look at this. She pointed to a line item she'd highlighted. There's a recurring payment, small, regular, almost invisible, to a consulting firm called Vale and Associates. It's buried in his administrative fees. Alistair found that. It's a legitimate consulting firm. It handles... No, it isn't. I looked it up. I'm a designer. I check brand registries all the time. Vale and Associates was registered 14 months ago. Its branding package, logo, website, everything, was built in a single day using a template service. I know because the template still has the stock footer at the bottom of the contact page. Whoever built it was in a hurry and didn't hire a designer. Lucian was very still. The typeface is wrong too, she continued. It's a standard sans serif, which is fine for a tech startup, but wrong for a consulting firm targeting institutional clients. A real firm would use a serif face, something that suggests stability and history. This is a front company, Lucian, and it was built by someone who doesn't understand design, which rules out Marcus because Marcus is meticulous. And it rules out Thorne because Thorne is flashy. If he built a front company, it would look better than the real thing. Which leaves Elise. Which leaves Elise, the intelligence specialist, the person who knows how to build a shell but doesn't think about the visual details, because in her world, substance matters more than presentation. She built the channel, Lucian. She's using Marcus's own financial infrastructure to hide the payments, counting on the fact that it would look like his handiwork. And she pointed Thorne at you as the decoy, knowing his travel pattern would be the first thing you'd investigate. The apartment was silent. Lucian was staring at her investigation board, at the index cards and post-its, and the single damning printout of a website with a stock footer. A stock footer, he said. A stock footer. Your centuries-old conspiracy was undone by someone who didn't hire a graphic designer. He looked at her. The expression on his face was, she didn't have a name for it. It was beyond admiration, beyond gratitude, beyond anything she'd seen in his carefully controlled repertoire of expressions. It was the look of someone seeing something they had not believed was possible. I need to call Alistair, he said. Obviously. He's going to be furious that he missed it. He's going to be furious that I found it. He's going to be furious in general. It's his resting state. He pulled out his phone. Then he stopped. He put the phone down on the kitchen table. He walked across the room to where she was sitting in her desk chair, surrounded by index cards and pickle logos and the debris of a mystery she'd solved with design thinking. He knelt in front of her chair. He took both her hands in his cool ones. Cora, you're kneeling. You don't kneel. You told me you haven't knelt since the 13th century. I am making an exception. He was looking up at her and his eyes were full and his voice was rough. You just dismantled a conspiracy that has been eating me alive for 7 months. With color theory and font analysis, you found what I couldn't find, what Alistair couldn't find, what 800 years of experience couldn't find. It wasn't color theory, it was brand consistency analysis. There's a difference. Cora. Yeah? I am going to call Alistair, and he is going to handle this. And by tomorrow, this will be over, and I will not need to hide anymore, and I will have to decide what happens next. What do you mean, what happens next? I mean that I came to this building to disappear, and instead I found you. And now the reason for hiding is about to be gone, and the reason for staying has nothing to do with hiding. Her heart was doing the mutinous thing again. Are you saying? I'm saying that I have a kingdom to go back to, and I don't want to go back to it, because going back means leaving this apartment, and this apartment has you in it, and a lamp that changes a room, and a murder board made of index cards. Investigation board. Investigation board. He squeezed her hands. I'm saying I would rather be here, on my knees on your terrible carpet. It's not terrible. On your perfectly adequate carpet, in your small, brilliant, chaotic apartment, than anywhere else in 800 years of anywhere. She pulled one hand free. She placed it on his face. His skin was cool under her palm, cool and smooth and ancient. He closed his eyes and leaned into her touch, and the sound he made, a small, involuntary, barely there exhale, was the sound of someone who had not been touched gently in a very, very long time. Call Alistair, she whispered. In a moment. Now, before I do something impractical. He opened his eyes. What kind of impractical? The kind where I kiss a vampire king on my perfectly adequate carpet and then neither of us remembers the phone call. His eyes went dark. Not the dangerous dark from the blood incident, a different dark. A warm dark. A dark that was all want and no warning. Cora, he said, and her name in his voice was a sound she would never get tired of hearing. I have waited 800 years. I can wait until after the phone call. Then make it fast. He stood, he picked up the phone, he called Alistair, and while he spoke, rapid, urgent, precise, the voice of a king, she sat in her desk chair and pressed her hand to her own cheek, where his face had been, and felt the coolness he'd left there, fading slowly into the warmth of her skin. The call lasted 20 minutes. She heard fragments. Elise, the consulting firm is a front. Yes, I'm certain. No, I didn't find it. Cora found it. With font analysis. A long pause. Then, faintly, through the phone. Font analysis? I'll explain later. Can you move tonight? Another pause. Good. Call me when it's done. He hung up. He turned to her. He was standing in her kitchen, silhouetted against the window, and the city lights behind him made him look like a painting, something from a Dutch master, all shadow and precise light, the kind of painting you'd stand in front of in a museum and wonder about the person and the story and the life. It's done, he said. Or it will be. Alistair is handling the rest. The rest being the removal of Elise from any position of power or access, permanently, non-violently, he added, seeing her expression. She'll be contained, exiled to a very boring part of the world where she can't do any damage. Where? Alistair suggested Greenland. Harsh. She sold out her own people. Greenland is generous. He crossed the room. He stopped in front of her. The distance between them was the width of a heartbeat. The phone call is over, he said. I noticed. You said something about something impractical. I did. I would like to revisit that. She stood up. They were close now. Close enough that she could feel the coolness of him, the impossible stillness, the 800 years of discipline and loneliness, and walking through an empty world looking for a reason to stop. She put her hands on his chest. Under the perfect fabric of his shirt, there was no heartbeat. Just silence and the solid, immovable presence of something that had endured everything and was choosing now to stand still. You're not breathing, she said. I don't need to breathe. I know, but it's weird when you stop. Breathe. He breathed. In, out. She felt his chest rise under her palms. Better? He asked. Better. She kissed him. She kissed him standing up, in her living room, between the investigation board and the pickle logo drafts, with her hands still on his chest where a heartbeat should have been, but wasn't. His lips were cool. They were always cool, but the kiss was not. The kiss was 800 years of silence breaking, and it was warm, and it was specific, and it was hers. He made a sound against her mouth, surprised, almost wounded, and his hands came up to her waist and pulled her closer. And for someone who didn't need to breathe, he was breathing very hard. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. His eyes were closed. His hands were trembling, the first time she'd ever seen his hands do anything but be perfectly, inhumanly still. "I have seen everything this world has to offer," he whispered. "Every century, every empire, every wonder. I have watched civilizations build themselves from nothing and burn themselves to the ground. And none of it is this. It's just a kiss." He opened his eyes. "It is the first thing in 800 years that has made me want to stay in one place." "The lamp didn't do it?" He laughed. A real, genuine, helpless laugh. "The lamp helped." "Good, it was $11. He kissed her again. This time it was slower, deeper, and she could feel him letting go of something. A wall, a habit, a centuries-old practice of keeping the world at arm's length. His hands on her waist were firm and careful, and the coolness of his skin against the warmth of hers was a contrast she was starting to think she'd been waiting for without knowing it. "Stay," she said when they came up for air. "Tonight. Not upstairs. Here." "Are you sure?" "I just solved your international vampire conspiracy with font analysis. I think we're past the 'are you sure' stage." He stayed. He held her on the couch while she fell asleep, his arms around her, his chin resting on the top of her head. He didn't sleep. He never slept. But for the first time in 800 years, the not sleeping felt like something other than a sentence. She woke up once, in the middle of the night, and found him looking at her with an expression of such naked, unguarded tenderness that it made her chest ache. "What?" she murmured. "You drool in your sleep," he said softly. "Shut up. It's on my shirt. Send me the dry cleaning bill." He pulled her closer. She pressed her face against his cool neck. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "About the kingdom?" "I don't know yet." "You have to go back eventually." "Yes." "When?" "I don't know. But when I do—" He hesitated. She felt it in his body, the tension, the careful choosing of words that had become a habit over centuries of choosing wrong. "When I do, I want you to know that this apartment, this terrible lamp. $11 and you love that lamp. This miraculous lamp, this investigation board, this life. This is not the interlude. This is not the hiding place. This is the thing I found that I didn't know I was looking for." She lifted her head. She looked at him. "That's either the most romantic thing anyone's ever said," she said, "or you're stalling because you don't want to deal with vampire politics." "It can be both." She kissed his jaw. "It can be both." 3 days later, the last text came from Alistair. "Alistair. It's handled. Elise is contained. The court has been informed. Your cover is no longer necessary." Below it, a second message. "Alistair. The castle needs you back. But I would advise, for once, taking your time." And a third. "Alistair. Miss Cora's font analysis has been entered into the official investigation record. I want you to know that I find this personally humiliating, and I will never forgive either of you. A." Cora read it over Lucian's shoulder. "He's joking, right?" "Alistair has not made a joke since 1673, but I believe this is the closest he's come." "Should I be honored?" "Profoundly." That evening, Lucian knocked on her door. She opened it. He stood on the welcome mat. "Go away." Wearing the navy coat she'd chosen for him, carrying nothing, looking like a man who had decided something. "Come in," she said. "You ridiculous, brilliant, overthinking man." He stepped inside. He cupped her face in his cool hands. "I have to go back," he said. "To the castle. To the court. There are things that require my presence." "I know. But I want you to know something first. If it's that you're actually a werewolf—" "I am not a werewolf." That is an entirely different and frankly less sophisticated situation. He rubbed his thumb along her cheekbone, and the tenderness in the gesture was so specific it felt like a language. I want you to know that for 800 years, I have been looking for a reason to stop moving. I thought it was a city, or a century, or a purpose. It wasn't. It was a person. It was you. You and your angry note, and your murder board, investigation board. Your investigation board, and your terrible red marker, and your ability to dismantle a vampire conspiracy with brand consistency analysis. You forgot the lamp. And the lamp. His voice cracked just barely on the last word. Cora, I will come back, as often as I can, whenever I can. The pacing is done. I don't need to pace anymore. You know why? Because I threatened you with a note? He leaned his forehead against hers. Because I found the reason to be still. She closed her eyes, his hands on her face, his coolness against her warmth, the impossible, absurd, magnificent reality of an 800-year-old king hiding from his own world, undone by a graphic designer with a red marker. Lucian. Yes? When you come back, bring coffee. He laughed. It was the best sound she'd ever heard from him, raw and real, and full of something that had been empty for a very long time. I don't drink coffee. It's not for you, it's for me. That's how this works. How what works? This, us, whatever this is. You bring coffee, I fix your outfits, and we figure out the rest as we go. He kissed her, slow, thorough, devastating. A kiss that said, I am 8 centuries old, and I have just discovered what the word home means. And it is not a building, and it is not a kingdom, and it is not a century. It is you. It is specifically, irreducibly, you. I'll bring coffee, he said against her lips. Good. And Cora? Yeah? The turning question, the one neither of us has asked. Her breath caught. Not tonight, he said, but eventually. Eventually is a long time. Not long enough, he said. Paradoxically, not long enough. He left at dawn. She watched from her window as the car pulled away, as the early light crept across the city, as the world resumed its ordinary, miraculous business of being alive. Her phone buzzed. Upstairs. Problem. I am on my way to a vampire castle to reclaim my throne, and the first thing I want to do is turn the car around and come back to your apartment. Cora, don't. Go save your kingdom. I'll be here. Upstairs. Problem. I know. That is precisely the problem and also precisely the point. She smiled. She set down her phone. She looked up at her ceiling. No pacing, no footsteps, just silence, the good kind. The kind that isn't empty because someone filled it and left a promise to come back. She picked up her red marker. She had a pickle logo to finish. Downstairs, in a small apartment that smelled like coffee and paint and the faintly ridiculous cologne of a man who had been alive for 8 centuries and had only just figured out what living meant, the pacing had stopped for good. Not because the silence was bearable, because it wasn't silence anymore.